Shedeur Sanders wasn't rattled, not even slightly. When the Cleveland media tried baiting him with controversy, the room expected hesitation, maybe a slip-up, but instead, Sanders leaned into the moment with calculated calm. His replies weren't just polished. They were protective shields, designed to outwit loaded questions and redirect attention back to football. It wasn't defiance. It was discipline. And that discipline exposed more about the media than it did about him. Sanders wasn't playing their game, and they knew it.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Shedeur Sanders, in those tense exchanges, what stood out wasn't just Sanders' intellect, but the silence from head coach Kevin Stefanski. While Sanders deflected heat with grace, Stefanski offered no backup, no shield. That left the young quarterback to weather scrutiny on his own, revealing a leadership gap off the field. The episode didn't just highlight media overreach. It spotlighted how isolated Sanders has been in protecting his own image. So here we are, yet again, watching a media circus scramble for drama, and once again it backfires. This time, the Cleveland Browns media took a swing at Shedeur Sanders, hoping for fireworks, only to get shut down in real time. And not with anger, not with chaos, but with pure composure. The kind of quiet, confident dismantling that makes you wonder why they even tried in the first place. Let's set the scene. Shedeur Sanders, the young quarterback with the last name that turns heads and a spotlight that never dims, finds himself at the center of yet another media frenzy. Not because of anything he did wrong, not because of bad gameplay, but because a swarm of local media decided to try their usual tricks, loaded questions, baited narratives, and the same tired attempts to get a soundbite they could spin into controversy. What they got instead? Stone-cold poise. Shedeur didn't flinch. He didn't get defensive. He didn't lash out. He saw the setup coming a mile away and calmly, strategically stepped over it. Every question aimed to provoke was met with measured, thoughtful replies. It wasn't just maturity, it was tactical. This is someone who knows the game behind the game. Selection. You could almost see the disappointment settle on the faces of some reporters in real time. They wanted a hot take, a headline, a hint of chaos. What they got was a young QB who knew better than to give them the satisfaction. And just like that, the room shifted. The story wasn't about scandal. It was about control. And Sanders had all of it. Now here's where it gets messier, not because of Shedeur, but because of the people around him. Where was the support from head coach Kevin Stefanski? Nowhere to be found. When your quarterback is out there fielding political questions, handling invasive personal inquiries, and managing media traps with grace, the bare minimum is for leadership to back him up. But instead, Stefanski stayed silent. No public statement. No pushback against the press. Nothing. It's baffling. You've got a young quarterback navigating one of the most intense markets in football, facing constant scrutiny, and you leave him hanging? That's not just poor optics. It's poor leadership. The coach's job doesn't stop at the playbook. It extends into mentorship, protection, and backing your players when the pressure piles on. And Stefanski didn't show up for that. The irony? The person showing the most leadership in this whole situation is Shedeur. He didn't just handle himself well. He elevated the tone of the room. Where others try to pull him into nonsense, he redirected the focus to the field, to the game, to the work. And that's the kind of presence that commands real respect. Not the manufactured kind that comes from hype, but the earned kind that comes from resilience. And let's not pretend this is an isolated incident. This kind of media behavior is becoming a pattern, especially in Cleveland. Journalists choosing gossip over gameplay, political landmines over player development, trying to squeeze clickbait from every answer instead of offering actual analysis. It's exhausting to watch. And more importantly, it's a disservice to fans. People don't tune in to hear whether a quarterback is willing to comment on a president. They tune in to see what he can do on the field. They want to understand his decision-making, his leadership, how he handles adversity during a game, not during a press conference ambush. Shedeur, though, he clocked this dynamic early. He knew what they were trying to do, and rather than play into it, he flipped the script. When asked political questions, he didn't take the bait. He gave respectful, thoughtful answers that sidestepped division without sounding robotic. He emphasized focus. He emphasized respect. He emphasized football. It was a media clinic, and the media hated that. There's a level of emotional intelligence here that you don't always see in young players. Shedeur's ability to read the room, maintain calm, and set boundaries without escalating tension, that's rare. That's the kind of thing you expect from seasoned veterans who've been through the media ringer for years, not someone still this early in their NFL journey. But maybe the wildest part of all this? The same media that keeps trying to spin him as immature or distracted is being outclassed by him in every interaction. Every attempt to rattle him only makes him look more desperate. Every sidestep he makes adds another layer to his credibility. And the more he stays focused, the more obvious it becomes that he is the grown-up in the room. And still, the coaching staff, silent. The organization, silent. Why? Is there a fear of clashing with the media? A belief that the rookie needs to earn his stripes by enduring this alone? Because if that's the case, it's a bad strategy. You don't develop leaders by letting them get picked apart. You build them up by reinforcing their strengths. And one of Shedeur's biggest strengths is his ability to lead without the drama. So why isn't the media talking about that? Why aren't they zeroing in on his composure under pressure? His ability to stay cool in tense moments? His clear sense of purpose and self-awareness? Instead, we're getting gotcha questions that lead nowhere, and coverage that ignores the most impressive thing about him. The fact that he refuses to let the noise get to him. There's a message being sent here, loud and clear. Shedeur Sanders isn't here to play the media's game. He's here to lead, to perform, and to represent his team with integrity. And until the people around him, including his own coach, start matching that energy, they're going to keep looking like the ones who are unprepared. It's time to shift the narrative. This isn't about clicks. It's not about controversy. It's about recognizing what's actually in front of us. A young athlete who's figured out the secret to surviving in the NFL spotlight. Stay calm. Stay focused. Speak carefully. And let your performance do the talking. Sanders has already mastered the part that so many seasoned players struggle with. He understands that in today's NFL, it's not just about throwing touchdowns. It's about navigating interviews, managing public perception, and not letting yourself become the story off the field. And let's be honest, he's better at it than most of the people trying to trip him up. The Cleveland media tried to drag him into the mud, and he walked through it without a single splash. That should have been a moment of reflection for them. Instead, they doubled down, more questions, more deflection, more spin. But at some point, they're going to have to reckon with the fact that Shedeur Sanders is not the one slipping. They are. If the Browns are smart, they'll start building around that kind of leadership. They'll stop letting him stand alone in front of the press and start protecting him the way other teams protect their franchise quarterbacks. They'll recognize that what he brings to the table isn't just talent, it's clarity. And that clarity is what this team desperately needs. In a league where so many young stars get swallowed by the spotlight, here's a player who's using it to his advantage. He's not perfect. No one is. But he's smart. He's calm. He's strategic. And he's not letting himself get dragged into the mess that the media keeps trying to make. That's not just a win for Shedeur Sanders. That's a warning shot to every reporter who thinks they can rattle him. It's not happening. Not today. Not tomorrow. And if he keeps this up, if the Browns get their act together and give him the support he deserves, he might just redefine what leadership looks like in Cleveland. So now the question isn't whether Shedeur can handle the heat. He clearly can. The real question is, can everyone else? If you've been watching this unfold with the same mix of frustration and admiration, make sure you hit that like button. Drop a comment. Do you think Shedeur is handling the media better than some veterans? And if you want more breakdowns of the chaos, drama, and unexpected wins across the NFL and beyond, make sure to subscribe. We're just getting started. And let's not downplay the weight of what Shedeur Sanders is dealing with here. This isn't just media pressure. This is the full-blown Cleveland pressure cooker, where the second a player walks onto that field, the critics are already sharpening their knives. And they've been especially eager with Sanders. Not because of something he said or done, but because of who he is and what he represents. A young quarterback, a famous last name, A new voice in a city with old expectations. That's the kind of setup the media drools over. But here's the twist they didn't see coming. Shedeur Sanders doesn't fold under expectation. He studies it, dissects it, and walks right through it without blinking. Every time a reporter thinks they're about to corner him with a spicy headline, he gives them a calm, calculated response that leaves nothing for them to run with. And that's exactly what's driving them crazy. Because when you're part of a media machine that thrives on conflict, what happens when the target refuses to fight? What do you do when the rookie in the room refuses to let your narrative define him? You double down. You try harder. You keep asking the same questions in slightly different ways. And that's exactly what the Browns media did, pressing Sanders with not-so-subtle political questions, trying to goad him into a misstep that could be clipped, quoted, and thrown across every sports network in the country. Instead, he delivered something they weren't ready for, grace. When asked about politically loaded topics, Sanders didn't stumble. He didn't hedge. He didn't rant. He offered respectful, thoughtful answers that stayed neutral while still being meaningful. And that might sound simple, but in today's hyperpolarized media landscape, it's rare. It takes emotional intelligence, awareness of consequences, and a refusal to give in to pressure, all of which Shedeur has in spades. And this is where the bigger conversation starts. Because Sanders isn't just a quarterback trying to win games. He's a young man trying to navigate a league, a franchise, and a media environment that doesn't always want to see him succeed on his terms. He's refusing to play the role they've written for him. And that makes him a threat, not on the field, but in the narrative. He's not flashy in interviews. He's not confrontational. He's controlled. And that means the media can't twist his words the way they can with players who speak emotionally in the heat of the moment. Shedeur speaks in a way that prevents manipulation. And that alone, that's leadership. Meanwhile, on the sidelines, the silence from Coach Kevin Stefanski is getting louder. It's not just the absence of defense. It's the absence of presence. When your quarterback is taking on this much heat and showing this much grace, you speak up, you shut down the bait questions before they can start. You protect your guy. That's basic team leadership. But Stefanski? He's nowhere. Not a single meaningful pushback on how the media is handling Sanders. No public praise for how well he's handling the spotlight. No sign that he's even aware of what Shedeur is enduring off the field. And that's not just disappointing, it's a liability. Because when your quarterback is holding together under media pressure, under the weight of fan expectations, under the burden of leadership alone, and you still can't step up to support him, that's not just a missed opportunity. That's a red flag. It sends a message, whether intentional or not. You're on your own. And yet, even with that weight, Sanders hasn't slipped. He hasn't cracked. He hasn't taken the bait. If anything, he's been the steady hand in a storm that others created. And in a city like Cleveland, where media drama is often louder than the actual games, that's a skill you need in a quarterback. So again, we're left asking the obvious question. Why is the focus not on that? Why are we not talking about how Shedeur's demeanor sets a new standard for rookies? Why are we pointing out that he's managing public perception better than half the league veterans? That he's fielding political questions with more poise than some actual politicians? Why is the spotlight still fixated on what he won't say, instead of what he is showing us every time he sits down in front of a mic? Because it's easier. It's easier to go for the drama. It's easier to write the narrative that sells. And in that process, the actual story, the real story, is getting lost. And it's this. Shedeur Sanders is showing up every single day. Calm, focused, clear-headed, in a market that eats young quarterbacks alive. He's refusing to be devoured. He's standing firm, no matter how ugly the headlines get. And the real tragedy? If no one steps up to support that, if his own coaching staff continues to treat that strength like it's expected instead of exceptional, it's going to wear him down. Because even the most composed leaders need a team behind them. Even the most self-assured quarterbacks need to feel like someone's got their back. Right now, Shedeur's handling everything with dignity. But if he's forced to keep doing it alone, that dignity becomes a shield instead of a strength. And that's how talent gets wasted. Not by poor gameplay, but by poor management of the person. And yes, it's time to call that out. Respectfully, but directly. If the Browns want to build a real future, it has to start with a culture that supports players like Shedeur Sanders, not one that leaves them to fend for themselves while feeding them to the media. Because when the noise gets louder than the strategy, everyone loses. But here's the thing. Shedeur's not asking for pity. He's not playing victim. He's just doing the job, leading with clarity, speaking with purpose, making sure that the story stays about football, even when everyone else is trying to turn it into a soap opera. That should be the headline. That is the story. And if the Cleveland media had any self-awareness left, they'd be embarrassed. Because what started as an attempt to trap a young quarterback into controversy has become a mirror showing their own obsession with spectacle over substance. And that mirror is not flattering. So now we've seen it. The bait was laid. The trap was set. And Shedeur Sanders didn't just avoid it. He disarmed it. He walked out of that room with his head high, his message clear and his character intact. Meanwhile, the media walked out with nothing. No quote to twist. No outburst to spin. Just a quiet, uncomfortable realization. They underestimated him. And if they don't change course, they'll do it again. So where does this leave us? It leaves us with a quarterback who's doing everything right and still not getting credit. It leaves us with a coaching staff that needs to wake up. It leaves us with a media environment that would rather chase headlines and give flowers to the young man standing 10 toes down in front of them every week. And it leaves the fans with a choice. Keep feeding into the noise or start demanding better. Better questions, better coverage, better support for the people who are actually trying to lead this team. Shedeur Sanders didn't clap back. He didn't throw shade. He didn't storm out. He led. And if the Browns have any sense, they'll stop letting the media test him and start backing him. Because not every player can handle this kind of pressure. Not every player has the discipline to hold the line. And not every player is willing to carry themselves with this much grace when the world's watching. But Shedeur does. And that says more than any viral headline ever could. And if you're still not convinced just how out of touch the Cleveland media is with this entire situation, let's break it down even further. Because at this point, it's not just a misunderstanding. It's willful ignorance. The kind that makes you wonder, are they trying to cover football or are they trying to script a reality show? Let's be real. The second Shedeur Sanders showed up in Cleveland, the cameras were rolling, not to watch him throw, not to analyze his reads, but to mine him for controversy. They didn't want football, they wanted a flare up. A viral quote, something they could clip, spin, and milk for clicks. But instead of taking the bait, Sanders walked in with something they hadn't prepared for. Strategy, not PR spin, not a pre-written statement, just real composure and an understanding of how these things work. He knows the media's tricks. He knows how one sentence can be twisted into a headline that completely misrepresents the truth. So he gives them nothing to twist. No rant, no snarky rebuttal, just clarity. And that is power. But the media doesn't like that kind of power. Not when it's in the hands of a young black quarterback who refuses to be boxed into the usual narratives. They want Shedeur to be loud, flashy, reactive. They want him to slip. But he's playing chess while they're stuck on checkers. And here's where it gets even more ridiculous. He's being punished for being calm. Think about that. The guy shows restraint, focus, and maturity. And somehow that becomes a story. Why isn't he giving us more? Why won't he comment on this? Why won't he engage in that? Because he's a professional. Because he knows how this works. Because he understands that every word carries weight, especially when you're in a city desperate for someone to blame. Let's talk about Cleveland for a second. This is a franchise that has cycled through quarterbacks like phone upgrades. Every time there's a new face, the hype machine kicks into overdrive. And every time, the media turns a hope into pressure, and that pressure into chaos. It's a pattern, and Shedeur clearly sees it. What's different this time is that he's not playing along. He's not promising the moon. He's not firing shots at other teams. He's not chasing the media spotlight. He's dodging it, because he knows that real leadership doesn't come from being loud. It comes from being consistent. And while he's out here showing composure in every interview, what's the coaching staff doing? Absolutely nothing. Shedeur Sanders. Let's be honest. Coach Stefanski's silence has become deafening. No public defense. No real show of unity. No firm stance against the way the media is handling their quarterback. It's like they're just watching this unfold from the sidelines, hoping it sorts itself out. That's not how you build a winning culture. That's how you build resentment. And the fans? They see it. You can feel the tension building, not just on social media, but in the way people are talking about this team. The questions aren't just about football anymore. They're about trust. They're about loyalty. They're about who's actually standing up for this kid when it matters. Because it does matter. How a team protects its young quarterback says everything about its leadership. You don't just coach a player. You back them. You set the tone for how the outside world treats them. And when the coach stays silent, it gives the media the green light to keep poking, prodding, and provoking. But if Shedeur Sanders has proven anything, it's that he doesn't need saving. He's saving them. From themselves. From the chaos. From the never-ending drama cycle. He's walking into press conferences like a veteran, answering every question with class, even when the questions are designed to throw him off balance. And the fact that that kind of maturity is being met with suspicion instead of celebration, that's the real problem. So, yeah, instant regret? Absolutely. The Cleveland media rolled the dice, hoping for a meltdown, and what they got instead was a masterclass. A shutdown, not with attitude, but with intelligence. And now they're left scrambling to figure out how to cover someone who won't give them what they want. Maybe it's time they started covering what actually matters, like the fact that Shedeur Sanders is handling more pressure than most rookies ever face, and doing it with poise, or the fact that he's setting a new standard for what leadership can look like at that position, or the fact that he's making a very loud statement, without ever raising his voice. And if you're here for that kind of story, hit subscribe. Drop a comment. Let's talk about what leadership really looks like and why Shedeur Sanders is already showing it, whether Cleveland's media wants to admit it or not.